Hey everyone, welcome back to State of the Industry, the best blockchain podcast coming to you straight from Silicon Valley. We're here in another beautiful sunny day. It's much better than it was last week. It was, pretty depressing, pretty rainy. Not what we're used to at all, especially not in May. But today we're super excited. We have a really cool episode. We're kind of focusing on data in the blockchain space this week. So I'm here with my resident blockchain experts and a special guest. We've got Svet Sadov, Ash Sharma, and Jason Martin. And yeah, we're covering a few topics. We've got something coming from AT&T, which is not something you hear every day in the blockchain space. The Ethereum Enterprise Alliance has something on real estate. And then we're going to dive into some events with VCs and investors that have been happening here locally in Silicon Valley. So it's something that as founders or people interested in doing stuff in the blockchain space, you're definitely going to want to stay up to date with those occurrences. So without further ado, and finally we're going to dive deep into Ash's project that he's working on called Friday Night Labs. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump straight into the first topic. All right, so we are talking about AT&T supposedly is now accepting crypto payments. Woohoo! When was the first time, or did you guys ever think that you would hear this, at least in the next 10 years? I did not. But let's see. So basically, we've learned, or AT&T released some information over the past week that said they are now accepting crypto payments. It later came out that realistically what was happening is they had a deal with BitPay, a cryptocurrency payment processing company. So what do you guys think about this? We've got some progress on one hand, it seems, but we also have just some basic business deals.
Yeah. Probably first we have to kind of inform everybody that we noticed that it was a little bit of misinformation coming from our beloved Cointelegraph. Because the first everybody kind of going to there and trying to find the truth. But that time it was they said AT&T accepts crypto, which they do not. They just signed an agreement with BitPay, and now they accept fiat from BitPay, which is a big difference.
Yeah.
But I think still it's very positive. What do you think?
It's kind of like it's past tax season. Ohio was taking, payments in cryptocurrency, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, Ohio!
It
great.
has a nice ring to it.
That's my home state, right?" And so I was like, "Oh, this is great." My parents were calling me, "Go, Jason, you can pay with Bitcoin and pay your taxes back home in Ohio. Come home to Ohio." But same deal. It was a BitPay deal where it was just passing through, but it's positive. At least. They're giving more options for people to pay for things.
Yeah, and I completely agree. But now, I guess the important thing is that adds value or detracts value from this situation are the companies, or Ohio in this case, themselves stating, we're accepting crypto? Or are people just diving deep and finding, BitPay is now doing deals with all these different...
It was very convoluted, same type of thing that happened this week. It made headlines for everybody on the crypto space that, you could pay your taxes in Ohio and Bitcoin. But but I think it's people just spinning and hyping. And then somebody takes a day to realize, hold on, this isn't how this
actually
is working.
Read the fine print.
Yeah.
Just let you know, right? Crypto, Bitcoin, or whatever other digital assets, they're not legal tender. So nobody can really pay taxes in crypto. Unless, of course, they're going to be the special act of Congress, which legitimize crypto on that level. But I don't think it will happen very soon. So you cannot pay your taxes in crypto. Not
directly.
Yes.
What do you think, Ash?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things here, and I think you guys have summed it up well. It's will take progress towards adoption. So I think the key benchmark to test here is it actually going to get new people into crypto, right? So if the person on the street, regardless of whether BitPay is taking it or not, I understand there's, big companies tend to be conservative in terms of legalities and regulation and such. But is the person on the street now thinking that Bitcoin and crypto isn't just, hey, for drug dealers, and some of the media outlets kind of do us a disservice in just highlighting bad news. well, this is good news. Now you could potentially, if you have, if you were, looking to try an alternative form of money or payments or what have you, now you're probably more open to it because there's more legitimacy in the space. So that would be the key.
Can I ask a question? You said that it's gonna attract more people to the crypto. Why don't we think that's differently? Because maybe that's not gonna attract more people into crypto. Instead, it's gonna attract more crypto people to AT&T.
It's probably
that
the
could
target.
happen.
Because you see what I'm saying, right? Because in order for people to stop paying in cryptocurrencies to AT&T, for people who were not previously in crypto, they need to install an application, go to the stock exchange, buy crypto. Instead, they always can use their familiar application, which allow them to pay to AT&T. And I'm talking about people outside of the crypto sphere.
So that's a good point. I think you can break it down to like 2 or 3 different points. People who don't know anything about blockchain or crypto or have avoided it, just this news alone could add more legitimacy to what they're doing. They might not actually
No, I'm
pay.
not questioning that.
Yeah,
That's okay.
So they might not actually pay in it. B, maybe this is a bad example, but I feel like cell phone companies, like telecommunication companies, just have a bad rap everywhere. I hate the companies
four
that
of
I
them,
utilize.
right?
Yeah, I hate the companies that I utilize. Jason, I know you've had some.
I've been having problems with AT&T for the last month. And when this news came up, I was just like, I don't even want to read it.
No, but I think that's a valid point. I don't know. I personally feel like just because AT&T now allows me to pay in crypto, even through BitPay, that wouldn't be the driver for me switching carriers or anything. You see my point? Like,
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. So there are not going to be more people coming from the outside of the crypto to the crypto because of that. But I agree, it kind of legitimize crypto in the eyes of some people.
Yeah.
Right. But isn't that the key driver that we need for people to then say, hey, this Bitcoin thing, I mean, here's the thing, it's this couple of, we have a marketing problem still, right? There's a lot of encouraging surveys out there say, hey, 90+% of people have heard of Bitcoin. If we have a minute, I can tell you a little anecdote.
Yeah.
I was at a bar in San Jose. I think this was last weekend. And my bartender, very friendly guy, and he was, let's say, shall we say, middle-aged, my age group now, I guess. And so I wasn't thinking. So my co-founder and I was sitting there, we're throwing back some martinis, and he's like, yeah, this thing we gotta really adopt and marketing and such. I'm like, hey, let's ask this gentleman some questions about what we're building and such. And he's like, well, do you really want to do that? I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to hear from regular people. So I'm like, hey, sir, have you heard about this? Have you heard about this Bitcoin thing? And he's like cleaning his glasses, like, yeah, I've had a Coinbase account for years. So that just threw me totally off.
It's a bar in the midst of the
but
Silicon Valley.
It's happening, right? But I want to see that more and more, where the conversation's not about, hey, drug bust or some random person off the coast of Thailand who's a Bitcoin trader gets.
I like that.
It's like, come on, CNN. Is that the only thing you can report? So people have heard of it, but these kind of things, and you can take that with a grain of salt. AT&T should really work on its service, and it'd be great if your cell phone cannot receive coverage as opposed to paying in crypto.
Yeah.
You can make those jokes, but it makes people think that, hey, it's actually legitimate. It's something that's here to stay. I mean, most people don't even know that Bitcoin it's not legal tender, but it's legal. If you ask 10 people on the street, maybe a few will say, the U.S. government has actually sold Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it's completely legal, 100% legal.
Go for it.
In the U.S. and basically everywhere in the
Let's
world.
put it like that. There is something which you can do legally with Bitcoin. There is something which you still cannot do legally with Bitcoin.
It's the same thing with cash, right? I can spend it over here and it's fine. I can spend it over here and it's not.
Right.
Yes, but still it is not cash, right? So it's not...
Well, I would disagree with that. Why do you say that?
Well, I'm saying in terms of the legislation, it's not cash. It's not.
Doesn't have the
it's
same
not legal
like-
tender again.
Yeah.
In order for the currency to be the recognized medium of exchange inside of the countries, it has to be recognized by the parliament. By the parliament or by the presidential act, whatever. In some
Yeah.
countries, there are more than one currency, which is two legal tenders, but it's not the case, of course, in the United States, America, and in most of the countries.
Okay, no, I didn't mean to belabor the point, but besides dealings with government, which thankfully most people have to deal with once a year, most people do, right? Taxes?
Or monthly or quarterly, depending on
all of us.
Depends on the situation. So it's, I don't, the legal tender part of it, I mean, ultimately my mindset is around adoption. Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much the legal tender part plays a role. In fact, it may be a positive because then we're talking about a global currency. So we're not limited by legal tenders. If I want to trade with someone in Mexico, right, I don't have to worry about pesos and US dollars. It's a global currency.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not legal tender actually helps in some ways. As well. So that's got to be
I think we
considered.
take your point. I think it's a very good point that we actually make this step in the opposite direction where we always used to be kind of going, right? With criticizing crypto and all the central channels. Something different.
I did want to say that BitPay is obviously doing a really good job. I mean, they're making huge news.
Yeah.
They've got somebody there on their marketing and sales team that just has it down to be able to talk to these large organizations and government people and get deals done. So
Realistically, BitPay is one of the largest drivers of adoption, like with everything
Yeah.
they do. Like if they're focused on getting large enterprise connections like this, and they keep making news in all these different sectors of industry, then more and more people are going to have news like this.
I like having more options.
Yeah.
Not that I would opt for AT&T, but
All right, I don't want to beat on AT&T too much because I have AT&T.
So do I. Actually. And the three people here,
and I'm forced to have it.
It's all
for the couple months.
it's all in good fun.
deep down, we really love them.
Yeah.
Don't shut us
Just
off, AT&T.
keep it up, AT&T. All right, let's move on to the next topic. So we're talking about the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. This is an organization that is basically working on taking Ethereum, which is a decentralized public blockchain, and they want to drive adoption or get usage within large enterprise businesses. It's a relatively straightforward idea. It's obviously not a very straightforward process, which is why it's cool that this exists and that they're working on these things. So they recently published on their site a report called, and we're going back to real estate. Real estate is one of the things that I think a lot of us are very familiar with. We've done a ton of events and stuff about real estate. You can find those on our YouTube channel, actually. Just search The Den Real Estate. So this report is called Real Estate Use Cases for Blockchain Technology. Basically, it showcased that the market is constantly growing. It went from like $7.4 trillion to 8.5 over the course of a year. So that's over $1 trillion added, which is a lot. And what they're stating as the major benefit is that blockchain tech allows you to buy and sell properties in a more granular way than the way the real estate market works right now. But the most important part that came out of this report, in our opinion, I guess, is that the main barriers that are standing in the way of faster real estate tokenization are defined as trust issues, regulatory challenges, complexities and dependencies, and volatility in market risks. So why don't we just quickly go through some of it's pretty straightforward, but the use cases of blockchain tech in real estate, and then let's talk about how these issues can be addressed, I guess.
Sure. By the way, that's an interesting question. In 1 year, the real estate market grows from more than $1 trillion.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's strange. And it's almost 15% or even 20% growth.
Well, the question that immediately pops up into my head before we get to the other stuff is where was most of that additional growth from? If it's a global real estate market.
Yes, and I have a hypothesis because I read this report. There is no indication from where the growth comes from, but I think it's several different sources. First of all, it's just from money market. the just growth. Yes, it's not inflation. It's inflation regarding the United States dollars, but it's increasing in prices. So more and more people started to go to the cities all across the world. It happens in Asia, it happens in the United States of America, it happens in Europe, this crisis of immigrants. So the price of real estate just goes dramatically during the past 5 years. And another source, it's formation of the new derivatives for a real estate market. As you remember, in 2008, it was a cause of the major crisis. And some experts saying, okay, guys, we are right on the way to the second crisis because of that.
Yeah.
Just a comment. Yes.
No, that's good. So when we plug blockchain technology into this increase in derivatives and whatnot, what do we find? We find as like they're saying, one of the primary things is granularizing, tokenizing real estate properties. So we've worked with and know a bunch of companies, Z House, Slice.market. A lot of what they're trying to do, whether it's on the commercial side or the residential side, is take a $200 million new development that's being put together and essentially break that down to where or people or small joint ventures or whatever it is can a lot more of them can get involved with investing into this development. So rather than having to have a minimum of $2 million in order to be of any part of this investment, you could have $50,000, something like that. And by owning a fungible token as part of this, I guess in this case it would be a non-fungible token, but you still have partial ownership of this large development. And more importantly, you can subvert some of the regulatory hurdles that goes along with transferring ownership of that investment to other people.
Yeah, passing the title. Yes.
In some ways, it's a stock market, if you will, on real estate assets, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's some pros and cons there.
Not exactly. That's an important difference.
Okay, well, what I was getting at was it's a fractional ownership system, right? So now instead of owning a corporation its entirety among, say, 20 people, you can have 20 million people owning different pieces.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons of that. The biggest pro in my mind is just efficiency of pricing so that you have lesser events around bubbles where different opinions get mismatched with the reality, if you will. The theory being that millions of people aren't wrong at the same time, while a small group of people can be.
Yeah.
So that I see as a pro. The con, I'm not fully plugged into this market, but there's coordination costs when there's more people that are involved. There's some fixed cost involved in maybe having trust, maybe having human education, decision making. Those kind of things would be a bit of a negative, but they can be mitigated.
I actually disagree with that. I actually think that yes, of course, it is a positive development because it goes right on our alley and it allows us to kind of find new applications for blockchain. But from terms of the overall economy, it's negative because now we create another derivative instruments on blockchain now. You see, because we still have practically the same number of the real estate units, because market all across the globe it's not physically growing, so there is not so many houses built every year.
But how is it different from corporations? So the analogy I'm drawing is you can have either a corporation controlled by 20 people, or you can have it the same size.
Do you mean how it's different from corporations? You mean like how different from how corporation manage real estate? Or
it's just ownership. Forget the management part of it. Okay. Just talking ownership, right? Yeah. So we can have a situation where 20 people are making decisions about $1 billion corporation, or 20 million people have fractional ownership and are making decisions. Right? So there's no derivatives here.
I can explain you where the difference lies. The difference lies that if you have, for example, one big stock of real estate, which costs like $200 million, right? And you can sell it maybe only to few people in the world, right? Because 200 million is a big bunch of money.
Yes.
Like, I don't know, billionaires or somebody. But now, if you put it in pieces like $200, now everybody can purchase it. Okay. The result is the price hike. because somebody will be willing to sell it sometime, and slowly by slowly, these $200 million become $500 million.
But why is that a bad thing? I don't
Because
quite see
it
the
is
price.
inflation. It's not connected to the real.
Well, here, but
It's
let
just pricing.
me add to it. I guess question that. If you're able to take that $200 million property and break it out into $200 chunks, just because more people can be involved in that, does that really mean that it's going to grow at a different?
Of course, that's the law of the market. That's the law of small numbers. As soon as you, that's exactly what many companies doing on the so-called regular market. They have, for example, Berkshire's hash rate. They have like a $40,000 worth of one share, and only a few people can buy it. But when the company want more people on ramp on their company on their stocks, what they do, they split their shares. That's a very, very usual tactics in Wall Street. That's what we're doing now.
I think we should listen to Jason as well. One quick point I would like to make though is there's a difference between inflation and just pricing, right? So accuracy of pricing, and you see that, and again, I'm going back to the stock valuation of corporations and such. Just because if a million people are saying the price is X and it's higher than what used to be the case, that's not necessarily inflation. That's just maybe accurate pricing. Price is an opinion, isn't it?
I think.
Let's let Jason.
yes.
Well,
if he has any.
actually, I was just going to, do what I do and just break everything you guys were just saying.
Please.
Which is that
I'm ready.
we talk about real estate. We've been to tons of real estate meetings. I know we all have. We've hosted them. We've had CEOs of these organizations come in and speak. But at the end of the day, there is simple, and they talk about regulatory and complexities in that. In the real estate market, that really, all these topics that we're talking about, fractional ownership and everything else, don't even make sense because we're not even there yet. Because when I want to get a house in LA, right, and I said my broker here who's my best friend, like, yo, give me this house in LA, right? She has to then go to LA, get into their broker's organization, which the records and the deeds are supposed to be, public record on titles, right? But every city has their own broker system there that sets up a paywall that you have to go through to pay in order to get the deed that should be public, so that my friend can buy my house that I want to buy in LA. And that's where blockchain will have the most impact. In real estate. If we can break up this, entrenched craziness that is these broker organizations that are regionally locked, make the public records actually public for people, then we can get to things like fractional ownership and things like that. I hope the Ethereum Alliance realizes that there's deep-seated problems within real estate that blockchain can immediately impact, but it's so entrenched, it's going to be very difficult getting those people to switch over to a new system. And because at the same time they're switching over and they have to let go of the control, which
no one wants to do.
Right, because they're making money off of having the control with their own little group.
So just to add to that, Proppy is the other company we've worked with that I forgot about. When we were running a panel with them, I was talking with, I believe it was the CTO, and he was saying that they already have a deal with, I think it was Vermont, don't quote me on this specifically, but they already had a deal with one of these, or Rhode Island, with one of these states to create a parallel registry of deeds that was, so it's like it was a test essentially. Like, we're going to continue using whatever process they already use, but we're going to create a parallel registry with Proppy so that they can essentially test actually having all of these records public and available and accessible using blockchain. I believe they're using Ethereum as opposed to the typical system. So that is already some amount of progress. This was an actual deal, a political contract saying, yes, let's test this out. So there's already some progress being made in that area. And I do agree with you. I think that's going to happen before we can even get to this discussion on the volatility and market risks.
Instead we'll say that private investors and private groups, obviously they can tokenize, do whatever they want and split up amongst their private people. And they can use fractional ownership there. That's not a problem. But overall, I just think the biggest impact for real estate will be
regulations.
Yes.
I still disagree, right? And I think we're opening the Pandora box. But
We do that every single week. It's good.
we did it every single
Never
week.
closed.
However, it may be we opening not the one Pandora box by two. One for ourselves and another for people who actually now owns the real estate. Because one of the problems with the current real estate situation in the world is that more than 40% of everything, all assets in the world, I mean all lands and houses and everything, is owned by less than 100 people.
Yeah.
100 people really owns. The question is where those guys going to be selling their real estate to whom? To everybody, to themselves? Not likely. But if now we, as a small $200 investors in their kind of part of their properties, we can inherit. So we can take those assets from their hands. You see what I'm saying? It's going to be like super overvalued. But getting back to your point, the difference between inflation and
Price increase.
That's a very good point because pricing precedes inflation. So first is pricing and then goes inflation. Because we understand right? Because more money kind of goes from top to the bottom and so on and so forth. Sure. But that's actually a very good point. Yeah. So I don't know.
And so it's I agree with I can sense the larger point is there's so many variables involved here that are in their trade-offs.
Yeah.
Right. So as I mentioned, there's some fixed cost with selling is hard, right? Today, like you're saying, if you have a mega deal of hundreds of millions of dollars, then two people can get together and have an efficient decision-making process versus then selling to tens of thousands of people, right? There's some fixed costs. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough, and Jason, you touched upon this. Wherever the human part of the equation lies, that's where the complexity and the cost usually is. And law is actually an extension of that, because then you got that's entirely human for good reason, right? Until you get RoboCop and such, right? So those kind of maybe the cost of selling will rise, which I think is one of the extensions of your point. But maybe the benefit of having a larger pool of investors, if you will, right? That can overcome those kind of discrepancies, and at the end of the day, it's another option, right? If two billionaires want to strike a deal, you can still do that, right? That's the beauty of it. So ignore the tens of thousands of people, but that's what I was driving the analogy with corporations. Hey, Uber doesn't have to IPO. Right, you can sell to some other private buyer, and Travis just had to go to Warren Buffett and say, "Give me this much money." Yeah. Right? It's harder to do because it's such a large amount.
Harder to do is one of the points, right?
Right, exactly. But they choose to routinely go to IPO markets because there's more value, right? If more buyers are competing for your equity, sometimes the price goes up.
Be more valuable. And I think
you always have that option.
I think that's a great way to wrap up this segment. Yeah. You think about. Forget all of the economics of it. Think about as from the human element. Housing is one of the most basic needs of every single person on Earth, right? Why should only 100 people own 40% of land and housing when that is something that is required by every single human being on Earth? And this goes back to the general idea of Bitcoin, decentralization, giving individual ownership to something that was not really previously owned by an individual.
Yeah, that's a whole different topics. It includes this.
It's a wide idea.
Yes, social aspects of the blockchain, and what Jason mentioned that become more people in the world become owners of real estate.
Just as a reasoning for. Yes. Smart people in the Valley and across the world to continue to look at this real estate issue through the lens of blockchain.
Absolutely.
And figure out how we can make this work better for everyone. Right? That was a great way to end that segment. All right. So now let's move on to the news segment. We're focusing on Silicon Valley news. We've got...
As promised.
As promised. So why don't we talk about... we've already been talking about housing and real estate. There's been a lot of news about housing, real estate over the past week in the Silicon Valley specifically. How does blockchain kind of potentially, how could that play into our situation here with skyrocketing housing prices, people trying to, put some regulation in to bring it down so that people can have a affordable standard of living. And there's so much desirability in this area for people to fly in and move here. And I don't want to leave.
So, Jason, what do you think?
So it has been a lot of big news lately, and here we're in East Bay here in Fremont, and they're putting up a bunch of more. They call them affordable housing, but it's not really. It's more affordable than other housing, I guess, than buying a home.
It's also much higher density.
Yes,
there's probably a few thousand new units, like single-family units, being created. 3 or 4 story tall, across the whole city, and so on the negative side, you see a lot of new traffic that's going to be added.
Which area is it again?
Just right here, just right by the BART station and all.
Right off of
Fremont.
880 BART station.
I think they've got like 6 or 8 of those high rises are going up, and so it's been local news. The whole Bay Area, it's becoming increasingly less affordable to live here. The prices keep going up. Real estate's growing like crazy.
Yeah.
It has been. Some numbers are saying it's starting to slow down here. Some reports over the past week is that people that have been here a while, the expensive homes are starting to see actually a bit of a decline in value. But the everyday homes still.
I think it's one of the most contentious issue here because there are more than 7 million people living just in the Bay Area in San Francisco, which is like a 1 hour drive from one end to another. To the people who don't know, yes. So it's just like one big metro station. So we packed in a rush hour. So we pack together here. So we cannot get to work. We cannot get out of the work. It takes more than 1 hour and a half to drive 50 miles. Standing in all of this traffic jam just because one of us forget to kind of go to the gas station and fill in the tanks and stop the car and stop the traffic in all the valley. And that's crazy. And actually there is another problem which connected to what you mentioned. You said, why don't we build up? And we can't build up here because of the seismology.
The
seismology. I'm sorry.
Yeah, seismology.
Shaking ground. Earthquakes.
I don't look. This is one of the most innovative places in the world. And is there any problem?
Thank you for reminding us. Yes.
Is there any problem we can't solve? If people in Tokyo, where there is an earthquake every 40 minutes, small earthquake, they can solve problems and have high density housing. We can't solve that here.
So to that point, you're familiar with the Millennium Towers, right? How for anyone who's not from Silicon Valley or doesn't go to San Francisco often, there is this beautiful pair of new living spaces, large towers, skyscrapers in the city, and if you look at one compared to the other, there is about, I believe it's a foot or a few feet's worth of lean to one of the towers.
So you can see 1 foot lean?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. So the tower, physically,
if you back up enough, you can see that the one is
one of the towers is sinking into the ground. And Ash's point is, we live in this place of crazy amount of money, brain power, and just labor output, and yet stuff like this happens.
And it's I feel if you really analyze the issue deep down, it's obviously an issue. Supply has to increase, right? There's massive agreement on that. The question is how. And it's not a question of the geography is a challenge, but I don't feel it's an insurmountable challenge.
It shouldn't be.
Right? And I've mentioned there's places where this has been solved. So, and there's massive demand. But I do feel the government has to step up and play a more positive role and be more innovative and understand the opportunity at hand, because we're quickly losing it. I've been to Beijing, Shanghai, Bangalore. We're quickly losing the edge, guys. This is, the government has to allow more experimentation and, there's a lot of things that have to be
I think
done.
you touch on a very sensitive point because it's not, yes, of course, it is about government, but it's about the local government,
Sure.
which is cross-sections of different interests. People who already have been living here for years, and they are interested to having all these prices going up. That's first. Second,
That is it. That is the issue. The cross section of different interests stagnates progress.
So what we can do, and then we have, of course, these big real estate agencies and brokers and everybody and the developers. They also have an embedded interest to have all these prices going up, and they all sitting in the municipal councils. So what do you think? So what do you think will happen? Of course, they stop any types of legislation which goes kind of different direction which they want them to go. What we can do about that?
Sounds like we need to fractionalize ownership.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe that's a good point, actually. Yes.
let me do the impossible and channel Obama and Reagan at the same time, right? Don't boo, vote. So if you're looking for housing, you can't you're SOL. Then you gotta vote in local elections. I take that point. Local government.
When did you last time voted in local elections?
Every single time.
Okay, I took
He's
the
a
wrong
man of his word.
So
I took the wrong person.
Reagan would say government is the problem, right? So I think those two levers. Government is a massive part of this problem. It really is. And we gotta step up and take action, all of us. I'm doing my part.
Okay. I already said. Okay.
Yeah, I never asked someone to do it. But yeah, so it's those kind of dynamics at play. But I feel, again, the issues, Tokyo has government, all these places have government, maybe less effective than ours, but still, it's working for them, right? So we gotta, maybe it's gotta come from, here's the other thing. So let's be solution-minded. We have a shortage of talent, right? As a founder, I know this, and you guys know this as well. To hire 3 engineers, you need like millions of dollars of fundraising.
Yep.
Right here in the Valley, and the remote thing works for certain people. It doesn't work for certain people. Imagine the influx of people we could have if we could lower the housing cost by maybe even 25%. Right? Not just engineers, designers, marketers, all those talented people who could come in.
Yeah.
So the companies actually have an interest in lowering housing costs.
I feel that we are moving more and more toward the political debates because all of this kind of new people, imagine new talent coming here in Silicon Valley, you know what it's touching? Okay, like immigration.
But it doesn't have to be. There's engineers from Colorado, Austin, New York. They want to move in here, but they're like, hey, the housing is ridiculous.
Well, think about
those kind of things.
The thing that constantly comes up in conversations is in the Valley is, I'm going to Austin, I'm going to Seattle. We're losing some of our top talent.
It's happening, yeah.
Just because someone can have a better standard of living somewhere else. And if that is a continual cycle, I feel like the Valley will lose the luster that it has, and that's definitely something that we don't want to happen.
A person's skill set can travel. The house can't.
Actually, right. I think we're a little bit forgetting that we are living in one of the most exclusive areas in the world, which on the forefront of all the crises in the world. And one of the crises which we have all around the globe, that's a housing crisis. That's a crisis of people coming more and more in the cities located on the border of seas, oceans, in most prolific areas which our civilization tend to populate thousands of years. Now, most of these places are taken. So we come to the point of we come to the point in our history when we need to change the paradigm. Maybe we need to start building new cities in the deserts, somewhere where we can artificially change the environment. Come on, guys, we want to go
to underwater cities.
Underwater cities. Now we come on. We have Elon Musk. He want to go to Mars. So why we cannot build a city just in a?
He can build a city on Mars. He can build one underwater.
Much less for a lower price.
I mean, if you set this up near Death Valley, the climate's pretty close to Mars, so it's.
Maybe they'll build a test city over there and then have it actually be useful and then use that as research in order to go to Mars.
Or we could build it here.
Yeah.
And
we could just build here, and then get people, affordable places to live so they can work jobs and contribute to the California, economy.
That would be nice. So let's shift on to the event that recently happened in Silicon Valley. We've mentioned briefly funding and actually creating something in the Valley requires a ton of capital. So naturally people, especially in the blockchain space, are keen to figure out where they can go to get resources, to get funding, to talk to the right people. So Svet, you recently, an event happened this past week. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, a couple of days ago, I went to the event in Santa Clara, and it was probably the largest in past week. And there were for about 50, 60 entrepreneurs and their supporters, and there were like 4 VCs and angels, and they went to the stage. And the fact being that most of the startups present on that event was familiar to me. It was mostly blockchain. I saw a lot of familiar spaces. We were one big happy family, but there's investors. I've never in my life seen none of them except one.
Now, is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, I'm coming to that. So in this one was actually has kind of lot of experience in blockchain, but he was not even interested because he now got like a 200 million fund. So imagine, the bigger the fund you got, the less interest you have for the small startups. It's obvious because you weren't going to be investing $200,000 in order to have like 1,000 problems on your hand. You rather invest like a big chunk of your money in one big company on the later stage A, stage B. So that's where I see we have a little kind of maybe crisis here in Valley.
Yeah.
You probably feel it yourself.
Yes,
your startup.
Yeah, right. We were just we're not actively fundraising just yet, but we're trying to meet some partners. But yeah, that's a problem. And I do have some viewpoints, obviously, in this.
Okay, come on.
I think it also depends on the nature of the market that these projects are targeting. So one thing that we haven't seen so much is real consumer use cases in blockchain, right? We've looked at developer projects, maybe enterprise and such. But with consumer apps, startups, it's not unusual to actually, if the market is big enough, to have a sizable chunk of fundraising. Right? So A16Z and all those companies do invest, millions of dollars.
Let me disagree with that immediately because not many people talking about that. But the problem, what I see, is that we see, first of all, angels they are too stick with the old paradigm. And old paradigm was we develop software and we come to the new markets. So we have new people coming constantly in our application, and our marketing is target the new wave of customers and users. Now in blockchain, it's an absolutely different play because all our users are already on some platforms, and that game is not about attracting new users.
It's about forcing a switch.
Forcing user to switch from one application to another, which is a completely different game. And VCs, they don't know how to play that game. Never in the history of VC business, never have ever they met such a type of situation. Right. Because now it's not like, we have like new game in town which nobody plays. No, we have a game with a trick. You be paid in that game, which is completely different from what you have right now, but it requires a lot of marketing, a lot of persuasion. See what my point?
Yeah, I see what you mean, but it's I'm not satisfied with that game being the only one in town.
Okay.
I think it's I mean, if you look at the adoption rates, I was actually doing some charting. We're at the same level of adoption as the consumer internet was in about 95, early 96. Right? At that stage, that may feel it's not early actually. We had Yahoo, Netscape, Amazon, a bunch of internet companies already launched live for close to a year with users ramping up, right? So we're actually behind in the state of affairs as regards consumer apps and adoption. So the game we want to play.
We're mixing 2 points together because first of all, now we talk about VCs. Not about consumers, because that's a different question. I'm talking about why VC do not actively invest in blockchain startups here in the Valley. That's a question, because they do not. They kind of taken this little bit cautious position. They waiting and looking. And I think one of the reasons is exactly what I'm articulated. It's that they did not know what to do with their startups. Because what they expect the same exponential growth of the user base. It will not happen. It will not happen if there is not going to be additional marketing or other efforts.
So you're saying,
but that's a very it will not happen. That's a very pessimistic point of view.
No, it's not pessimistic. It's a practical.
Hold on. No, it's not. It's to say problems cannot be solved. That's a very, I would never
You don't
say
say
that.
the problem cannot be solved. I say the problem is expensive to solve. That's what I said.
That was the point I was raising. That's why it takes to have a successful consumer startup. It does take on the order of millions of dollars in funding. That can happen. Okay, we've seen, again, let's go back to, guys, we've seen this movie before. I'm not saying the consumer internet to blockchain parallels are a little bit tired. You guys have heard that.
Yes.
And there are
Yes.
some differences too.
Yes, there's differences, and there's differences. But I don't accept the position that the exponential growth can't happen. It's expensive to solve for, but with the right use cases, the right applications, it can reach to the common person. They can be a draw. In fact, my position is, if you want to reach exponential adoption, it's not going to happen through payments, not in the developed world, right? The sound money, the payments part of it, it's just not going to happen. Because that's just not enough of a problem. The real problems are in consumer real world use cases that can be solved better via blockchain technology. I think there should be more focus on that. And, of course, I am focused on that conveniently.
Yes.
But that's my point of view.
So let me round this
So
off.
I think VC, they will follow the market as soon as they see there's a solution to the growth.
That's the problem.
Let me see if I can wrap this up.
Yeah.
It seems like VCs, maybe to combine both your points, VCs right now they've been spoiled. They don't have a precedent.
Of course.
Yeah, they don't have a precedent
Specifically in the
anymore
valley.
that they did
Specifically in the valley where they
the
used
internet,
to, yes.
the cloud.
Yes.
There's somewhat of a playbook that has been written.
Moreover,
companies
they in the
area.
valley they already they played the same game again. So the crowd, they kind of rushing like all these probably like 500 funds which present in the valley. They all rush into 1, 2, 3, 4 startups like unicorns, and then keep investing in these startups without ever going public, and that's create kind of this Murdoch type situation. I'm sorry to say that. Like if you keep reinvesting, keep getting money from some sources, I don't know, family funds, whatever, and keep investing in the same startups, the valuation is blown out of any proportion. And we still don't have any kind of reports from financial side from any of those unicorns.
So are
What's
you
going on?
saying that the new approach?
That's not it. That's,
But let's see. So are you saying that a new approach that they probably should, that we believe they should take,
Yes.
maybe not that they will right this second, is go back to making a lot more smaller investments because we need to discover what these working solutions
because
are.
VCs, it's a venture capital. It's not supposed to be guaranteed. Now
like
they play the
Series
game.
D,
Nobody
yeah.
want to risk their money. They say, oh, I'm not risking money. So why are you doing VCs? Go invest in the banks.
They need to get more risky.
They need to get VCs.
I want to hear what Jason has to say.
Yeah, I was going to make one point though. The one thing that we do have here in the Bay Area that I've seen here and not anywhere else like it is that we do have a lot of incubators that are really good, that are putting smaller amounts of money in. But yeah, you might not get enough. You might not get enough to be able to hire 3 people, but they'll at least get you started up to, maybe up to a Series A, depending on which one it is. And they are investing in blockchain stuff. I mean, Starfish has got some good stuff. Everybody knows Y Combinator. One of the best ones that I know around the Bay Area that I like the most is Plug and Play, where they help you get everything together and you pitch it to other organizations in order to get funding from other enterprises, which I think it's really an awesome thing. And I have not seen that back home in Ohio or anywhere else that I've been. But
That's correct. I'm not saying that there is no investors here. I'm saying that VC don't invest. They're supposed to invest, as from my point of view.
I think
But of
some
course
of the VCs also own large pieces of these incubators, and so they are filtering
that's not true.
So let's wrap this up. Maybe for the founders, for the potential, for the entrepreneurs listening, it sounds like if you are in the blockchain space, you have your ideas, you should be focusing on looking for incubators, like some of the ones that we mentioned, looking for that smaller push to get you to where you can prove out your idea. Everyone needs to be proving out their ideas. There's not as much precedent as some of the previous rounds of technologies. So within the next few years, I would be personally hoping that that's what we're going to see is some small investments that grow these companies to the point where something clicks, the tokenomics start working, or the technology starts saving companies a lot of money in transactions, or saves someone from getting salmonella in the case of food, or from seed to sale, something like that. That's what I'm kind of coming to the conclusion on.
Yeah, and I think once we can prove some stuff out, like that we can save organizations money, then VCs will be very
and then it all starts again,
right.
So yeah, and we didn't get to mention at that event. So it's basically, this all comes back to the event that you went to. You felt like it wasn't that effective or that productive, right?
Well, I think we more or less kind of come to the conclusion with that topic. Yes, there were other thing we can talk about that event. The major thing is that we have to stop pitching to other founders. It's a good exercise, but to
practice,
be productive,
but
yes,
not productive.
VCs has to unwrap, and then to make it more actively than they do. That's my point. And we probably can ask opinion of our guest.
Yeah.
You will kind of explain us or present us your case and your adventure with your company here. That's probably going to be illustrative.
So Ash, why don't you just briefly give your background, so people, we should have done that at the beginning.
That's okay.
That was my bad.
Yeah.
But give your brief background so people know where you're coming from, and then give us your elevator pitch on what Friday Night Labs is.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of unpack it kind of in the perspective that we've been taking today. So
Yeah, that sounds good. So hi, my name's Ash. I'm the CEO of Friday Night Labs. It's a pleasure to be here at the Den, surrounded by the lions of the Den. So
That belongs to the first part of
That's
our
good.
That's okay.
That's okay. So yeah, by background, I've been building internet products for the last 10 years and more. My co-founder and CTO has been doing that a little bit longer. We've worked for companies like Yahoo and Google and worked high-scale internet products. And deep down, it was always bothersome to us how our personal data was used, misused, and not really put to good use, right? In terms of value.
collecting it and wasting it.
Collecting and wasting it, essentially. That's a good way to put it. So what Friday Night Labs is building is a marketplace for our personal data. The core motivation is that our personal data should be useful to someone else. And with blockchain technologies, we can actually have efficient marketplaces that have good primitives around ownership, high value exchange via native tokens, and also inherent privacy by design, which encourages sharing of personal data. Right? So that's our big vision, basically about efficiency of personal data exchange. And to keep it to make it very real, one of the use cases we can think of is around our location data, right? So just maybe an example that hits home is, let's say it's Friday night, convenient, that's the name of the company, but you're looking for a Chinese restaurant in Fremont, right? So what's your scenario? Usually you go to a Yelp or a Google Maps, and then you type in, hey, what are you looking for? And then you scroll past the ads, and then there's 40 different results, and this is actually proven in data.
Actually, that's not okay. Can I
Go ahead.
Can I challenge? Actually, it's not what happening in most of the cases I was part in. Usually, we ask somebody
Sure, yeah.
what do you think, and he immediately come with some solution.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yeah.
Who are you asking, though?
you.
So yeah, that happens. So word of mouth is
Usually we ask the person who kind of local, right? If I go to Palo Alto, I know the person who's living here. I'm saying, okay, guys, so where do we go? He said, okay, here's the spot. We go there.
Yeah.
There are actually
happens,
10 spots in Palo Alto, which sucks 90% of all the people. That's what I.
Yes, that could
In the
be
university
the case.
streets,
Yeah,
right?
it
In a
depends
couple
on
of
where you are.
parallel streets,
Yeah.
that's the spots, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows it.
Yeah. So let me address some of those
Yeah.
points. So we'll go step by step,
Yeah.
and I'd love to be challenged. So this is not just
Oh, you can count on me.
Jason's already.
There's a reason I'm sitting next to
right
you.
now.
No. So yes, word of mouth is effective, but I keep going back to efficient. Is this the most efficient way to find a solution? How many? The third time you ask me or Chris for, hey, Chinese restaurant, what do you think? They'll be like, hey, dude, just use Yelp, right, or Google or what have you. So I think the common person would probably think that way, and that's the usage behind these products.
If I can add one thing before I forget, because I know a little bit more about Friday Night Labs than the users or the audience does right now. I guess if I think about word of mouth, the value of word of mouth is limited to your sphere of influence.
Yes, this is actually right.
Your people who might have similar taste to you.
Yes.
And also a limited number of experiences.
Exactly right.
Right? If your friend says, I'm vegetarian, I don't eat any meat.
That's right.
Their recommendation is going to be harder to compare to someone who eats meat.
Correct.
Because you can't get that information from them. Each restaurant has tens, dozens, hundreds of dishes.
Yes.
So how are you going to get information, an average information of all of that from just your circle?
Right. So social networks and word of mouth is essentially the concept of social networking is around that. It's word of mouth, digitized or not. And that exactly suffers from the limitation that you described. So we want to open that up and say, hey, someone is not in my social network, but they've been to a great Chinese restaurant last night, which is actually pretty good. And I have data from their visits that they've been to that place, or more people have been to that place in terms of repeat visits and such. So it's actually a measure of a rating or review. Every time there's a location visit from a particular place, that's equivalent to a rating or review that we can start using and say, this is objective data. It's not based on some random person that you don't know, but
how they
might
can
be the
write a
case on Yelp.
review.
Maybe biased. It's based on real data that you can start using, right? So we feel that's valuable because that gets the bias out of the system. One second.
Can I ask, is it a Yelp on blockchain? That's what you're doing?
I wouldn't characterize it as such, because Yelp is fundamentally a UGC-based approach. So it relies on user-generated content, right? So it's and that actually, so that's why I was trying to finish my point, which was that suffers from the 1% problem, right? You're familiar with it. You never even know what that is. So we've all used Yelp or these similar services, but very rarely do we actually write a review. So I've been to I eat out a lot, and there's a lot of good data that I've collected somewhere which is not being used, right? So that's the key idea. How do we get from 1% to 100% of the data set so that we can then start having interesting insights and start moving it around? That's the key of the idea.
But blockchain will not solve that. Because it's not a blockchain, it's just like a distributed database, right? So you won't solve the problem by just letting people...
That's not the biggest innovation in blockchain.
Well, it's not, but in terms of the Yelp on blockchain...
It's not Yelp on blockchain.
Okay, so give me that idea. Yes.
Maybe this helps. Yeah. What specific data points are you collecting?
We can actually do very well with just locations and timestamps.
Locations and timestamps.
Yeah. So the way the app works is we have privacy mechanisms in place. So you onboard, and it never asks you for any real life identity, no name, emails. Literally press a button. There's a wallet that's created behind the scenes with a small amount of seed in crypto to start with. And we start tracking background location information with exclusions for home, work, anything else that's sensitive. But the idea is that it just seamlessly works behind the scenes, where it already knows the restaurants I've been to in the last week, or the bars I've been to, or any local events I've been to. So there's no necessity for me to write a review. It just happens by virtue of me living my life.
Come on.
So if you were to put some smart contract or back-end analysis on figuring out which restaurants or locations were the best, you would essentially take the frequency of visits based on power users, or just in general total number of visits, as well as the length of the visit. I guess those would be the kind of two major...
Yeah, so it's the data science pipeline. We can actually extract a lot of good value with just simple measures that you described. So maybe if I've spent 2 hours at a particular restaurant, that's one vote. If there's repeat visits in the same month, that's another. That's a very strong vote. So you can then build a profile and say, well, this person usually goes to Italian restaurants. So their vote from this place, new place, is pretty important. So the idea is, Swet, maybe this will appeal to you. So
No. That's a different perspective. That's actually changes how I looked at it.
Yeah.
Now I look at your startup and your product differently because that's may add value.
Yeah.
It's
The 100x part of it.
well, I can also
science.
change that idea, and I will. But it's not, as I said, Yelp on blockchain. That's
Correct.
different because
Correct.
they do not actually go and physically have to write that, right?
Yes.
They just have to visit, and then of course there is statistics and then
Yes.
machine learning and so on and so forth.
That's right.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So it's now
And another piece that I from hearing talk before, you've got incentivization as well. Which is the big thing of
And
the other big piece of
everyone
blockchain is
wins.
incentivization.
It raises the question of privacy big time because basically there are two types of scenario. Either you hide this data, it means the service is centralized under your authority, or it's on blockchain, it means that everybody can see it. It's just like a little bit kind of a thin line you have to work.
Not quite. So you can actually be sovereign on your data if it's encrypted on blockchain via your private keys.
I see. So you have these options. You can You can encrypt.
Right. So the core principle is, and I'm sorry to interrupt earlier.
No.
It's just I just wanted to.
I do it every time.
We're here to learn from you.
As I said, I interrupt everybody.
Ben's job is to challenge you.
Yes.
We still want to hear what you have to say.
And by we know each other more than a year already, right? So that's
This is not the first time.
first time we're facing each other.
Yeah.
For a lot of different reasons.
So let me just do a quick side. The first time I met Swet, I think this was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was at the den with the class, and within 5 minutes of saying hello, it's like, I disagree. You're ridiculous. It's like that would never happen. So, but
it was a good reason, right?
It was for good reasons, right? So we approach problems from the different angles. But I really respect Swet's. You're able to very incisively get to the key questions, which
Thank
you
you.
have. Right? So that's great. You raised the question of privacy.
Yes,
right?
I
That's very important, right? We're a no-name startup and say, hey, you're going to track my background location. How do I?
I'm cool with Google having it, but you.
So there's a couple of different ways to handle that. So first, some people are naturally inclined to be less privacy sensitive and try out blockchain stuff. So that's the crypto enthusiasts community in the Bay Area, which actually is, we found by some estimates, doing some initial research via Coinbase and such. We may have at least 100,000 crypto people in the Bay Area using wallets.
Wallet
So
owners.
that's a good enough community for us to start. Remember, we only need a small level of critical mass to get started. If you get 10,000 people in the South Bay, we can start having some pretty good ratings and reviews with background data to get this started, right? But the privacy concern then is, first of all, we have some guarantees. So initially, we don't have your data ever leave your device. Right? As a general principle, we never see users' data. Right? We can do some automatic analysis on it, but we're not able to identify and say that Chris has been to this particular place or what the location history is. You have pseudonymity.
Pseudonymity, yeah.
Pseudonymity.
We were discussing that earlier.
Say that 4 times as fast. Right? Pseudonymity. Right? So it's the Bitcoin model, which is why we're a Bitcoin fan. And, that's another reason why.
No, it's perfectly all right. Everybody's Bitcoin fan. Look at that one.
Yes. So the pseudonymous model actually works really well for us because then you have a good enough level of privacy where you can basically have public addresses and collect data and do analysis on top of that without actually knowing what the data is. Right? So the data is always encrypted. It's always in users' control, either on the device or for backup reasons or analysis reasons on blockchain. Right? So that should solve some of the privacy issues. I understand initially there might be some that's where the hustle comes in, and we have to convince people that this is safe and completely private. We can also open source the part of the application that actually writes to the user's device or to blockchain, the code part of it anyway, open source. So there's going to be, and we can also do security audits with outside firms that say, hey, this
validate
is legit.
that portion.
And will you be using some tokens of your own there?
No, so we don't want to do that.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Okay.
Yes.
And let me go a little bit meta on you, right? So money only works if it has very strong network effects, right? So what we don't want to see is a world with hundreds of tokens. You go to Subway, you got to pay with Subway coin, pizza coin, plumber coin, right? So it's that's
Why not?
By the way, that was the first discussion we had. So here's some
You remember, right? Yes, that was the first one.
And
That's
then your
correct.
point was it's all automated. But the thing is, complexity in the system is bad. And at least I'm not saying this is the case with all ideas. At least for me, I just want an efficient marketplace that converts personal data into money, makes it tradable. So then you gotta then ask the question, what's the money that you want to use, right? So then the properties of money come into play. So we want something that's high scale, scalable in terms of transactions, that's got good support, enough liquidity to get started. So that means we don't need to have our own token because that's
So you
not
got
our
Bitcoin.
interest, right? So our business model is actually not the tokens and the appreciation or inflation in them. No pump and dump here.
Yeah.
We just pick a high scale native token, let people trade in it. And then there's business models that are possible in terms of brokerage fees, basically a market making
You just said native token, but I assume you mean not your native token. You mean
Right.
like probably
token.
some maybe token or coin, right?
I meant the native token of the blockchain.
Of the
we're using.
blockchain you
And
can
it's
be
not our
using.
blockchain.
Yes,
So
yes.
by extension, it's the,
Yeah.
so we use a Bitcoin-like.
However, just to I'm trying to find the weak spots in your beautiful architecture because actually I agree that makes sense. Actually, collecting data, and there is no such application which I know, which is not asking people to kind of post review immediately. But as soon as you go with any types of token, you need to QYC in ML. You know that, right?
If we use existing chains, we don't. And if we're non-custodial,
Well,
we
you
don't.
have to do that whether you use it or not, but you can use another services of another company. You can kind of outsource this QNL in MAC, but still you will have the private info of your users somewhere, either in your servers or whenever you choose to
You
do
don't
it.
need them.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
It's just tracking addresses.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be tied to a name
So
at all.
let me
Just an account.
maybe if I can just provide some clarity, right? So think of a non-custodial wallet, right? That's the core of the application, okay? And you agree that those don't require AML and KYC, right? If you have a non-custodial wallet,
To create your own wallet it's just
No,
yours, right? You
right, so
don't
it's
need to-
Well, that depends
non-custodial.
on the type of the wallet.
Well,
Because
non-custodial, it doesn't. The users have their own private keys.
Exactly.
That's not
So
subject
that is
to.
the
We never
important
have
part.
ownership of the funds, right? So that doesn't require. That's actually exempt. The latest FinCEN guidelines 2019, which I read every single word of,
That's
which
good.
still doesn't provide enough clarity. Thank you, FinCEN, but
It's a
step
start.
in the right
Give them
direction.
something, yeah.
So they specifically have an exception for what's called unhosted wallets, which is loosely translatable to non-custodial. So that's what we are. We're providing the software where users have their private key and they're making transactions with another user.
The facilitator,
So it's just like
not the
non-custodial
custodian.
wallets. So by extension, then if you have a service on top of that, what is money in blockchain? It's just data. It doesn't matter if it's Chris's location history or his money. It doesn't matter.
It's treated the same.
It's treated the same. So that's the issue, or that's the opportunity we have, is we're actually not subject to...
yeah.
Anyways, that's my position. Go ahead.
You come prepared.
We sent him all these questions before.
That said, the den does not provide legal advice. Check with your attorney. And so, channeling in here.
I didn't expect actually you read it, the latest FinCEN. It's only like a month old, but you did.
it's,
Excellent,
but
excellent.
yeah,
On
so
top
that's
of it.
Already 3 points for you.
Jason, I wanted to check with you and see if you had any input on these.
Not so much. No. I think it's wonderful. One, I was applauding because just take a sovereign token that's already out there and build on top of it. Why get all crazy with
Why complicate
having?
things?
Yes, every layer that you add is just more complications you're taking on. So why do that if you don't have to? I think that's awesome, and for sure, just collecting pseudo-anonymous data and using it for interesting things is.
So you like it, right?
You know that's what I like to do. So
Yeah, I know that you like it.
So I'm raising a seed
But you have
round
to be
if you guys-
objective.
I'll take your wallet right now. No, that's
No.
good feedback. Those are very good questions. So yes, the mark of a good founder, which I am trying to become better at every single day, is to look yourself in the mirror and see your delusions. right? Because we're delusional. We are every single day, right? So it's about looking at the risks, and the biggest risk, as you actually, no one's asked me about this stuff, is the regulation and stuff. Because the obvious question is, why can't you do this with AWS and PayPal? Well, you can, but not with the privacy guarantees and efficiencies that blockchain provides. That's the point.
Yep.
You can have 200x cheaper transactions via high-scale blockchains today. By the way, that's new. The technology's been out there for 10 years, but it's only in the last 6 months to a year that they've actually become scalable. Right? So now I can do high-volume transactions with Chris's data, Sweat's data, Jason's data.
You're doing
exchanging it on a transaction-per-transaction basis. And that's important because the other thing with FinCEN is you can't batch transactions.
They have to be
As soon as you batch, you're in control, which means you're custodial.
That's correct.
So we can't batch transaction, which means we need very, very small nano payments, right? 1,000 satoshis here, there, fractions of a penny. I can't pay 10 cents on PayPal to do that. No. So we have a solution that's 200x cheaper, which can actually make this happen today with users actively trading in a high volume capacity and owning their data in a privacy sensitive manner.
Okay.
Hold on. So my question is, so you're doing Bitcoin Cash then? You on Bitcoin Cash?
Well, there is...
Because we're talking about scaling and transactions, and I'm like, hold on now.
So
we're not talking Bitcoin.
Maybe you have a similar question? Did you?
No. That's a good point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
let's just dive into it.
So the question is about scalability, and I'm very excited about this.
You said Bitcoin-like earlier, so I was like, okay, two things.
There's a reason I said Bitcoin-like, right?
Is it Bitcoin SV?
You did say Satoshi.
He's like, thank you very much, sir. Show yourself out.
But
we'll have that discussion. All right. So the trilemma applies, guys. Right? Decentralization, security, scalability.
Yep. It's my favorite.
We're not so much in the decentralization camp, right? So adequate level of decentralization is fine. We do need scalability. We like Bitcoin's security model, right? So, and it's been proven in production and such. So that's the right Bitcoin family of chains is right for us. Then, by process of elimination, BTC just doesn't make the cut, right?
Yeah.
Unless you believe in Lightning Network
That's what
and
I
such.
thought.
And
That's Bitcoin's Satoshi vision.
I'm not here to dump on any other
That's-
chain. But it's Lightning Network, more power to them. Hopefully it works. But I'm an application developer. I don't want to be that close to the silicon. Okay, I want to build on a scalable, stable platform today, right? So it's either Bitcoin Cash or BSV. That's what you're left with if you want to be with the Bitcoin family. Okay. And with Bitcoin Cash, there is some concern that I have around the stability of the protocol and developers mucking with it, right? Again, we want to be very close to the user. Yeah. So I want a set protocol that I can use for the next 5 years. Okay, and I don't want random surprises and outages every 6 months, hard forks. There's some developers that want improvement and such. I don't want any improvement in TCP/IP. That's the chain to me. If you were starting Yahoo, I used to work at Yahoo, but it's like TCP/IP to me. Okay, I don't want to change it. It's got to be set. I want to be able to build on top of it.
Here's my proposition, because we certainly need a different episode about
we will have a full episode on that. Right now,
I won't because I'll get sued.
But what's good and what this podcast will be.
Are we?
So my point is,
I'm happy to talk about Craig if you want me to.
I think we don't have enough time because
that's a whole other episode, man.
Let's keep this one on topic because I know this is like
go off the rails.
5th or 6th Pandora's box that we're going to open
today.
No, we're keeping this one closed.
I see the opening now. So,
but no, my point is that what's good is hearing from you the thought process on the pros and cons. Like myself, I don't care like what is being used, who thinks this or that. All I care about is the end user, right? If what we care about is adoption and actually growing stuff. If one blockchain protocol makes more sense for that product, for that approach, than another.
Absolutely.
I want to know what the pros are that led me there, what the cons are that led me away from the others, and why this particular approach makes the most sense. And what's good is you just went through from Bitcoin all the way down through the different forks, the different thought processes to if SV is primarily focused on staying and not changing. And that's what you want. Stability. That's the way you described it. It's focused on stability. And you don't foresee any changes, you foresee the scalability and everything for your product. Say you actually reach the peaks of what you want as far as usability, millions of users dumping their data on the chain every single day, and you believe that it can reach that and you're not going to have too many bottlenecks or issues. I see no reason why not to focus on that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is a thought process.
Yeah. So hopefully I could just round that off right there for now. Obviously,
you good, man.
We can go. Yeah. But I'm glad that we thought about that. So anyone who's listening can also think about it from a logical perspective, right? Like, forget the emotional aspects. There's so much emotion and philosophy embedded into the entire blockchain and crypto space. Especially for a new person, it's extremely hard for them to navigate that.
Absolutely.
And get down to the nitty gritty. Right now, with what I'm trying to do, what approach do I take?
And that goes back to the previous point we were discussing, guys. The 0.3, 0.4% of the world that's even tried crypto, that's not going to cut it for us, guys.
Yeah.
And now it's it's scary for anyone to join this whole crypto thing. It's toxic.
Yeah.
You look at Twitter, there's mudslinging matches.
That's scaring people.
Hey, I'm staying away from this, right? Any engineer, any sort of informed person's like, hey, what's going on? I don't want to touch it. Hands off, right? So there's a lot so we need to change that, and that's going to come with real people solving real problems in the context of use cases that are available now.
Yeah.
Right. So beyond even payments, I respect the payment part of it. The sound money, I'm a big proponent of that. However, I just don't see that happening in the United States. I just don't. In Silicon Valley, you want to send, $10 to someone, forget crypto. There's Venmo, there's free, Chime is a service that no fees, right? That's cheaper than crypto in some ways. And then they say, hey, no way, we're in sound money. This can't be debased. Venezuela, this and that. Yeah, this is not Venezuela, right? So I don't see the payments thing just happening. It's all about consumer apps.
So you're looking for different than United States market for your application? That's what you're doing?
Well, we're starting here. So I think if you look at the whole stack of utility for blockchain applications, I think payments is closer to the chain itself, obviously. And I think that's going to happen more in the developing world. And there's very good projects that I respect going on in Asia, Africa, others. But
can you name us a country where you kind of were your first target? What is it as a country?
For my company?
Yes, of course.
Not just country, right here in the valley. Right?
But you just said that it's not going to happen in the United States, right?
No,
so you start
using
here.
the payments.
The payments adoption, I don't see happening.
Too many regulations.
And that's a disappointment because, guys, we lost 10 years of great innovation. I mean, what can we do that Venmo can do, or all these stupid mobile apps that build gigantic businesses?
They just work.
We could have. Hey, there's beautiful wallets out there, and we could have done so much of that. If not 7 years ago. We lost all that time with all this infighting and all these stupid issues.
No, I don't
focusing
think we
on adoption.
lost these 10 years. Okay, come on. I mean, only 2 years ago we got no more than probably 3 coins. Which everybody knows and everybody uses, right?
So I'm talking about payments specifically, but hear me out.
But that's application. We just started.
No. Hold on.
2 years ago.
Time out. In 2009, you could have used Bitcoin as a payment mechanism.
No, you can't. Because in 2010, you have you have to install your node in order to be able. Only in 2011, one of the most usable wallets.
You're talking about usability. You're talking about all those things.
No, I'm talking about the payments. Because in order to use payments, you need to have wallets and then many of them.
So you're talking about adoption of payments.
No,
you're talking about just
as a payment mechanism.
Just forget everything else. if you chose to, you can do it.
And, I'll throw in the next piece, which is the technology behind it. And if you're running into fat blocks and things like that, how are you going to buy groceries? You have to wait for 45 minutes to get something through. You know, let alone the regulation of who's holding the wallet at the time.
Right.
And if your grocery store now is holding, depending on how the wallet structure's set up, they have to be a money handler on top of being a grocery store. Come on, it doesn't make any sense.
And by the way, about the
Jason,
payments, don't forget about Lightning, because that's a different type of game. So it's a second layer on top of the Bitcoin to change everything in terms of payments. That's what I'm saying. I think we are a little bit impatient. It's just very complicated technology.
I don't think Lightning's the answer. That's my opinion. We could spend a whole
I know you don't like it. I don't like it.
Here's the nuance that I feel. We have had, and technology matures. I take your point. It's I'm not being impatient so much about it. What I'm saying, my question is about focus. We've had 10 years of very good technological innovations. We've had very little usability issues solved. We've had very little marketing issues solved. We've had very little design issues solved. The fact that a user, the common person's heard about Bitcoin, but what the hell is this private key? And what do you mean if I lose it, then I lose all my funds? Well, get out of here, right? So there's a lot of education around it. Well, you should probably have, you use hierarchical, actually HD keys didn't exist in 2009, so you had your wallet. It's usability issues. But the point is, we could have matured the ecosystem faster in a direction towards adoption by focusing on these people-oriented issues, as opposed to big blocks, small blocks, this, that. Hey, how does it scale to 100 million? Well, you only have 10 users.
Yeah.
So it's all the usability issues. Right?
The other issue is that a lot of money came into the space, and a lot of people became much more focused on just extracting money out of it than building the technology out. The internet, when the internet was growing, you couldn't just throw a website out and then have a ton of people spend money on it, and then you just take everything. And you've already, at the most base desire, you've already reached your goal, which technically should be 10 years out, where you have to get users adoption in order to get that payout, as opposed to, I'm just going to put out this white paper, get a ton of people to fund me ahead of time, and then it's too early for regulations to catch up, so I'm just going to go to the Bahamas. And that's the other major issue, I think, with this the way that everything has progressed.
Well, I see your point. I disagree, but I think that the end conclusion is right. So we need more people looking on the application side.
Yes.
And you are one of the people who are doing that. And I think actually your project makes sense. So I can find a couple of other questions I can challenge you with.
Sure.
But I think that we need I like your point that we need applications who works without us caring about that.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we have so little time left in our lives just to live the life without pushing all these buttons. And I really appreciate startups who just can't say, okay, you can unramp, install this application, that's your choice, and you're probably gonna be having some coins or not having some coins, but that application will give other people this one and you that one, right? You made that choice once, install it, and then you live your life ever happily ever after without opening this application every day and
value and
pushing numbers inside it.
Right. So and there is an engagement part of it. So so it's you're correct about the blockchain handling. I if it were up to me, I wouldn't care if the common person doesn't know the wallet stuff and all this. I just want them to solve their problems, right? So there's push notifications, there's a search interface and all those kind of things that we can learn from existing applications. So there is an engagement part of it. But the blockchain part of it, it's the plumbing that happens behind the scenes. It's on autopilot, like you mentioned. So that's a good way to face it. So yes, and in time, if we are lucky to find adoptions, we want to go into other personal data marketplaces, just have more pieces of personal data. So location's one, and it's high value and easily verifiable. That's why we're starting with it. But you can imagine your browsing history being shared. Everybody's getting nervous here.
Oh wait,
no, but let me give you maybe a long tail, but I think a usable scenario here, right? For blockchain experts, no one's an expert in blockchain. We're all students.
Aficionados.
I consider myself a student of blockchain, right? So let's say I've been studying this stuff for almost 4 years now, and I've kind of gone through the motions, and my browsing history is, let's say, higher quality than it used to be 4 years ago, and it's higher quality than someone who's joining now. Back to the point of toxicity.
How do you measure quality of browsing
That's
history?
the question.
You could, in terms of, you have to seed the system to say, well, there's some sense of belief. So I'm going to go out on the limb and say that what Sweat's reading is higher quality than, let's say, someone who's just gotten onto Twitter.
How do we measure that? That's difficult.
You mean it's like more
forget
valuable to someone else?
Okay, so let's forget the quality aspect. But let me ask this question. There's a student in college right now, okay? And there's UCSC as these courses and such. And that person is thinking, maybe I want to see what people who are actually in this space, where are they spending their time? Okay?
Yeah,
which white papers are they reading?
what it
Right?
is.
Forget the quality.
Okay.
Right? But what is Ash Sharma looking at this week? Blockchain related.
Yeah.
Not the other stuff. Thank you very much. But what is Sweat reading? Which white papers? Right? If we can bundle that up and share in a privacy sensitive manner, so you don't know it's Sweat's data, don't worry. But someone at UCSC doing this blockchain course, will they pay 25 cents for it? I bet they would. I bet they would pay more. So browsing history is valuable. It can be shared. It's all it's going to
That
chat
is
to it.
valuable.
So
I am betting it.
So that's like taking.
Why are we talking about the browsing history? You want to use this browsing
Well,
history?
what I'm saying is
it's
it's
an
a pattern.
expansion
It's
of-
an expansion of personal. So we want to be. Our vision is to be a personal data marketplace. We hate to see.
So you
waste.
want to sell your data to
You want to trade
advertisers?
it. You want to not advertise. There's no
So
advertising. in this
maybe
space.
this rounds it off. If we think of Yelp as the UGC
Yeah.
compared to your approach for location-based tracking, you could take Twitter, based on what people are talking about,
Yes.
and then instead you take that as a UGC and compare it to utilizing browsing data.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Twitter or yes, other content.
Yeah,
mechanisms,
where
Facebook
people
or
like
LinkedIn. Yeah,
putting
that's
their
right.
thoughts out
Yeah.
as opposed to what they're trying to absorb.
Right. So we're several months away from that, but that's another extension, right? So we're not limited to just location. We want to expand to be a personal data concierge for this marketplace,
That's
which I'm betting is valuable. Yeah.
So how much time we have left for? Do we have
we're,
enough?
we're rounding it off right now. Let's hear Jason's.
So just because 1,000 people likes what Svet's reading, or maybe there's 1,000 Svets, and one person's like, oh, 1,000 people have read this particular article. Just because the majority of the people are doing something doesn't mean that it's quality. Quantity doesn't mean quality.
No, 100%.
You
Which is why I think everything that Ash is thinking about doing or like working on requires some solid data science behind it, right? Some analysis, figuring out based on the data which of these you'll have to define which one of these users or sources of data is higher quality.
Okay, well, let me address that. If you just have a
Svet is
minute.
actually reading at least dozen shitty white papers per week. I don't
to
think
find
it's
one good one, he's read 1,000 terrible
one good
ones.
one. Yes, so that's not equality.
Let me address that. So browsing history is just, so you're looking at URL visits as the only signal. There's more signals. How much time have you spent? Have you spent 90% of the time looking at the shitty white papers? I hope not.
Well, I have to read white papers which come to my attention because otherwise I cannot figure out what's going on because there is most of the project doing the shitty white papers. I have to report that and say, okay, guys, here we are.
Okay.
Most of our white papers are bad.
It's like me.
Right.
I picked up McDonald's earlier today because McDonald's is easy to pick up. Do I love McDonald's? No.
No.
Would I much rather eat almost any other restaurant?
But think
Real
about
restaurant?
it.
Yes.
But think about it.
But if my data's populated with McDonald's,
But there's a data point. This is what it all comes back to data science. Eventually, you could apply some machine learning,
With
AI.
multiple
to it.
signals as well.
Yeah. So in the case of McDonald's is a fast food place, right? Meaning that your time there is going to be a lot shorter. That is a data point that could
except
be
today where it took me 40 minutes to get to the
But
drive.
that wouldn't be the average. That wouldn't be the average data point. You see what I'm saying? It all comes back to how you analyze the data. But and this is big data. This is what everyone in the valley has talked about for forever. Is with enough data, you can find patterns. You can determine with AI, with machine learning, you can find patterns. You can figure out what is generally more quality. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, that's fair enough to say. And let me also put it this way, okay? Google, Facebook, and all these big companies have the sharpest AI minds in the world working on their data stuff. And they're not short on data. right? They're short on quality data.
I probably can name you another
And
organization
they're also
which has
serving up
sharper
like, well,
mind.
what's the number? How many websites is Google actually serving up through their search engine?
Like 0.3%?
Yeah, of all the data that's out there. So
Right. So I mean, you're actually making my point, which is it is a data problem, right? So the big data part is actually commoditized, right? But if we can get more people in the ecosystem with signals that are actually not even on the web, right? So the fact that you've been to McDonald's, if you have location label, maybe Google has, but it's not on the web. It's not usable to so many people outside of
It's
Google.
only usable by Google.
I get it.
That's the point on itself, is Google is the only...
But I'm saying, I feel like the majority of the data that's going to be served up will get into the same Google scenario where it's only the point whatever percent is actually that's being sought by customers, even though you're sitting on 99 point whatever percent extra data points.
Well, how much do you
Which
need
creates-
to create value? No one knows. It depends on the case.
I'm saying there's a data problem inherent.
Always.
to-
I completely agree with you.
It's a valuable data problem. So the 99.7% of data that we don't use, we don't pay for. So it incentivizes the creation of valuable data. And we don't have to use every single data point. Yeah, I think that's appropriate, but the use cases can still be solved for.
Yeah. So I think now's about as good a time as any to wrap up. We could go on many of these, like pick a Pandora's box. Every week. We could go down it. But we'll have to save those for a later podcast. This has been definitely one of my favorite podcasts. I have a lot of fun diving into the previous
Mine
topics.
too.
Yeah, thank you.
First one.
So to close, Ash, is there any announcements you have? Any places people can find out more about you? I know you were trying to do some market research as well.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from people. You can find us on LinkedIn primarily. So it's Ash Sharma, Friday Night Labs. I'd love to hear from anyone who would want to provide feedback on the application, especially if you're not in the blockchain area. I'd love to hear any
Extremely
feedback.
valuable data.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much again for opportunity to disrupt everything with my horrendous accent. But it was a pleasure as usual, and thank you very much. And you can find me Ask Svet about Crypto channel, and generally the type Svet Sedov in Google. You can find my articles and everything about me, which is relevant, by the way.
Yeah, and thank you guys very much for listening or watching. Please hit that subscribe button. Click a like if you're on YouTube. We put these out every single week, and we really want to get feedback. We want to know what you guys think of the format, what you guys think of what we discuss every single week, and we just want to interact with the community. Our whole goal is to help grow the space and showcase that there is a lot of crazy, cool stuff happening here. We want to be a part of it, and we want you to be a part of it. As far as the den is concerned, we have a bunch of new stuff coming out per usual. If you're interested in enterprise blockchain, all the big name cloud and service providers have blockchain as a service. They've recently added it, or there's now all. Basically, we have a panel coming up June 21st. Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, and hopefully a couple other large companies are going to have representatives there. This will be at ETC Labs in San Francisco. That's going to be an awesome event. We're going to see the enterprise side, the large company side of blockchain adoption. So you're definitely going to want to be there. Maybe we'll get some people at each other's throats. Hopefully, maybe not. I don't know. I'm never opposed to a good, discussion. And we also have an upcoming Hyperledger for Developers class, upcoming Blockchain for Developers class, data structures and algorithms class. You can find information on all of these on our website, www.theden.io. Sign up as soon as possible. We're running low on space with all these classes. So if you're interested in getting your career as a developer in this space, definitely check us out. with that, I think that's about it. Jason, anything?
Good.
Those announcements are still coming.
I've had some progress this week. Maybe by the end of this week or next week, I'll be able to say I do business in California. We'll see how that goes.
There it is.
Progress with stuff.
Progress with all sorts of stuff.
So keep an ear out, keep an eye out for those updates. Once again, thank you very much for listening and watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.